It was a Thursday when Richard, the CEO, invited me to lunch at Morton's Steakhouse. Unusual, since our conversations typically happened over vending machine coffee in the server room. But 11 years at Riverton Manufacturing had taught me to read between the lines, the expensive wine, the fake smiles, the awkward small talk about my contributions to the company all in past tense. Then it came. Derek, we're restructuring the IT department. We're bringing in someone with fresh ideas. Brad's nephew just finished his computer science degree. Just like that. 11 years gone, replaced by a 23-year-old whose greatest accomplishment was being born to the right sister. I sat there, knife in hand, staring at my half-eaten steak. Richard kept talking something about 2 weeks severance, an amicable transition, and how I should be grateful for the opportunity. Grateful. That word stuck in my throat like a bone. What they didn't know was that I'd seen the writing on the wall months ago when Brad started bringing his nephew Nathan to executive meetings. I'd already put my contingency plan in motion. They thought they were cutting out a replaceable cog. They didn't realize they were removing the only person who truly understood the brain of their operation. My name is Derek Mason. I'm 42 years old, and until last month, I was the IT director at Riverton Manufacturing, a company that produces specialized machine parts for the aerospace industry. When I joined in 2012, their technology was a disaster: paper records, Windows XP, and a server that crashed weekly. They hired me to modernize, and modernize I did. I'm self-taught, no fancy degree from MIT, just decades of obsession with systems and code. I built Riverton's entire digital infrastructure from the ground up, their inventory tracking, their automated quality control, their client management, all designed and implemented by me and the small team one assembled. The crown jewel was a proprietary software I created called System Sync, a custom ERP system that integrated every aspect of their operation into one seamless platform. When I started, Riverton was struggling to fulfill $5 million in annual orders. Last year, they did $78 million. The executives took the credit, cashed their bonuses, and apparently decided the architect of their success had served his purpose. The betrayal didn't happen overnight. Looking back, I see the careful, calculated steps they took. First came the documentation requests asking me to create detailed manuals for all systems. Then the gradual exclusion from executive meetings. The hiring of IT consultants who asked suspiciously specific questions about my code architecture. 2 months before my fancy farewell lunch, I lost admin access to several company servers. A week later, I discovered they'd hired an outside firm to attempt to reverse engineer System Sync. My team members were being pulled into closed-door meetings with HR, each returned with tight smiles and averted eyes. The final blow came when I overheard Brad and Richard discussing the upcoming sale of Riverton to Aerospace Dynamics, a deal that hinged on the proprietary technology assets that would be included: my technology, my code, my years of innovation, packaged and sold without so much as a consultation, let alone compensation. I went home that night and pulled out my contracts. As I suspected, there was a glaring hole. While my employment agreement covered work product created during employment, it never specifically addressed proprietary software I had developed independently and brought to the company. System Sync was built on my own framework, one I'd been developing for years before joining Riverton. Technically, legally, they were about to steal my life's work. That's when I stopped playing defense. I'd built System Sync with a sophisticated authentication protocol that required quarterly certificate renewals, a security feature I'd explained as protection against external threats. What I hadn't mentioned was that these certificates required my personal encryption key. Without it, the entire system would enter lockdown mode within 30 days. I also had meticulously documented everything, every request, every line of code, every instance where executives had acknowledged that System Sync was my creation, not strictly a company asset. Emails, meeting recordings, even a company newsletter that featured an interview where Richard himself referred to it as Derek's brainchild. Instead of confronting them, I quietly contacted Sarah Chen, a tech-focused attorney I'd met at a cybersecurity conference. I shared my documentation, my contracts, and my concerns. "They've got a problem," she said after reviewing everything. "And they don't even know it yet." I also reached out to 3 former team members who had left Riverton after seeing how the company operated. They all confirmed what I suspected. They'd been pumped for information about my systems, then sidelined when they defended my work. The day after my termination lunch, I cleared out my desk under security's watchful eye. Nathan, Brad's nephew, stood in the doorway of my former office, already redecorating in his mind. He had the confidence of someone who never faced real consequences. "I'll call if I have any questions about the systems," he said, not even trying. To hide his smugness, I smiled. "Of course. Happy to help." 2 weeks passed. I didn't hear a word. I used the time to file patent applications for key aspects of System Sync's architecture and to document my independent development of the core framework, dating back to 2009, 3 years before joining RIVERTON. Then the call started. First, from the IT help desk, minor system glitches. Nothing alarming. Then from middle management, reports weren't generating properly. Inventory tracking was showing discrepancies. Finally, Nathan himself called, trying to sound casual. "Hey man, quick question about the authentication protocols. We seem to be getting some warning messages." I explained the certificate system in deliberately vague terms, omitting the critical fact that a full system lockdown was now 18 days away. On day 25 after my termination, Richard called. His voice had lost its condescending edge. "Derek, we're having some serious issues with the system. Nathan thinks there's some kind of authorization problem." "Sounds like the security certificates need renewal," I said calmly. "It's an automated protection feature against unauthorized use." Silence. "Then, can you come in tomorrow to fix it?" "I'm not an employee anymore, Richard. But I'd be happy to discuss a consulting arrangement." The meeting was set for the next morning. I arrived with Sarah Chen, my attorney. Richard's face fell when he saw her. Brad and Nathan were already in the conference room, along with Riverton's corporate counsel. "This should be a simple technical fix," Richard began. "I don't see why." "We need lawyers involved," Sarah smiled. "My client created System Sync using proprietary framework he developed before his employment at Riverton. The system will enter complete lockdown in 5 days unless proper licensing and ownership are acknowledged." Brad turned red. "That's extortion. Everything he did here belongs to this company." Sarah slid a folder across the table. "Here's the documentation showing Mr. Mason's development of the core framework dating back to 2009. Here are patent applications filed for key components. Here are 17 documented instances where Riverton executives, including yourself, acknowledged his ownership of the intellectual property." As they flipped through the evidence, I added, "I've also learned about your pending sale to aerospace Dynamics, a deal that relies heavily on proprietary technology you don't actually own." The room went silent. Their corporate lawyer whispered something to Richard, whose face drained of color. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "Fair compensation for my intellectual property, a licensing agreement for continued use of System Sync, and public acknowledgement of my role in creating the technology that transformed this company." The negotiations lasted 6 hours. By the end, I had secured a $3.8 million payment for past use of my software, ongoing licensing agreement worth $1.2 million annually, and a non-disclosure agreement that prevented them from disparaging me to future clients. I also received something unexpected: an apology from Richard. Not a corporate, lawyer-approved statement, but a genuine moment of remorse as we waited for the final documents. "We got greedy," he admitted. "We convinced ourselves that we could just absorb what you created. I was wrong. I left Riverton that day not just with financial security, but with vindication." The sale to Aerospace Dynamics went through too. Months later, with proper attribution for my technology, Brad took early retirement shortly after. Nathan was reassigned to a lower-level position in customer service. As for me, I used part of my settlement to launch Mason Digital Architecture, a consulting firm specializing in custom enterprise systems. Within a year, I had 15 employees and a client list that included to Fortune 500 companies. The final chapter came unexpectedly. About a year after my departure, I received a text from Richard asking to meet for coffee. He'd left Riverton after the acquisition and was working as a consultant himself. We met at a small cafe downtown. He looked older, humbler. "I wanted to tell you that you taught me something important," he said after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "I've spent my career treating people as resources rather than partners." "It cost me a lot more than money," I nodded, surprised by his candor. "We all make mistakes. The difference is learning from them." As we parted ways, I felt something I hadn't expected, not satisfaction at his downfall, but a sense of closure. I had stood my ground, protected what was mine, and moved forward stronger than before. For years, they thought I was just another employee, a cog they could replace when convenient. They saw my work, but not my worth. In the end, they learned what I knew all along. True value isn't something you can take, it's something you create, protect, and carry with you. The system and the genius behind it was mine all along.